Welcome to part 23 of the XC restoration. In this one, we put the front end back together, save for the springs and the discs. I haven't got those yet. We also do the fuel lines, talk a bit about the fuel lines. Jason Hill drops by to talk a little bit about the fabric we've purchased for the seats for the interior, and a few other bits and pieces. But to begin with, we'll start with another very brief slideshow. And kicking off part 23 of the XC restoration is this P5 LTD I had in about 1987. A stupid buy indeed. I swapped it for my blue XC Fairmont, the one with the 351 manual in there. And this was a really rare orange car. I think it was originally orange. It was a sort of a custom order, but it was a bit of a box. Looking back, that was a very good restorable project. But in the 80s, of course, I had a bit of a desire to paint it polar white, and I did that. It was tired, it was sluggish. You'll see there's some of the panels coming up soon. You'll see they're rusty. Of course, back then I wasn't cutting out and welding. I was using good old bog, and of course that boot lid at the edge there got bogged up pretty badly. But when it was all finished, it did look presentable. But it was straight. The body itself, the hang-ons were rusty, but the body itself wasn't too bad. The engine was clapped out, but the interior was quite good. I felt overwhelmed with this one actually. I got to the point where I just wanted to get rid of it. I'd had enough of it. And of course I still had the green jigsaw at this stage, but it really was a bit of a hassle. But at the end of the day it did look good, when it was finished. And of course I did the priming and all the cutting in and stuff like that, but I did give it to another bloke to do the top coat on, and so when it came back it did look quite good. But it was a car that I bought and I regretted. These days if I got that car I would restore it properly, whereas back then I had limited knowledge and I really didn't know an awful lot, but it did teach me an awful lot, that car, so it did end up in some way being worth it. I also replaced the vinyl roof with a correct padded vinyl roof, and of course you can see when that shot just gone that it did have the smaller back window. The vinyl roof was actually hard to get because it was padded and only one bloke would do it. But you can see there the interior is lovely. It had something like 11 interior lights in it. I put some under the seats and all this sort of stuff. But the engine bay did leave a few things to be desired. But I could only do what I could do at the time. So that's it. The P5 LTD with my P plate on there. I was only a young guy. I was 18 or 19 or something like that. But I didn't have it for that long. But it did teach me one or two tricks. It's quite a windy evening. These are the hinges I've painted up. You can see they work nicely. I'm going to put them in now. Now I've done the other side. The other side's much easier. You can sort of hit it with an extension. This is more complicated. You've got the wiring loom, which I'll just pull that out of the way. Now some people route the bonnet cable behind them, but it's bringing it up on quite an angle at the top like that, which I don't want to do, so I'm going to leave that beneath that. Now I haven't put a tap through here. You can run a 5/16 coarse tap through the threads if they're sticky. Now these, the other thing I want to talk about are these. Now they're the sort of they've got like a star washer on them which really hang on. The trouble with these, if you have to do heaps of adjustments, they tend to chew up the paint and make things look a bit yuck. But I mean, if you want to, you can certainly use a flat washer type arrangement. But it really is neither here nor there. I'm not too fussed about that at the moment. I'm just doing these up finger tight. I'll put the spring on. I've had the springs electroplated, and of course these were painted red and they were peeling and there was sort of like a bit of surface rust here and there. They've come up like brand new. They're like those tie rod adjusters on the XW that I was talking about before, or at least in the last video. Now this one down here is a shocking pain actually. That's a really difficult one to get to down the bottom. So I'm just going to muck around and get this started, and gosh, okay, let's feel the hole. There it is. And I might have to use a collection of extensions and unis. I probably should have done this before I put the booster and the brake cylinder on, but the master cylinder, but you've got to adjust them anyway. So I'll come back in a moment. Now I didn't explain this too well and I was wrong. There's a hole down there and you've got to thread the bonnet cable through there and then up through that little cutout there. That'll keep it out of the way of the spring. I didn't actually know that until I just sort of looked at it now. And of course, don't forget, nothing was in this car when I got it. It was just a shell. Hoping the zoom's a bit better on this camera than the old one. You can see I've got the socket on there, and the bonnet cable's sort of in the way. I'm not even going to get a 3/8 drive ratchet uni in there, so I'm going to use 1/4 inch drive stuff to try and get in. So this is 1/4 drive. Gosh, that is a bit of a mongrel. But at least I can sort of tighten it up, just finger tie, like that. And that way I can adjust it later if I need to. And the bonnet release cable is good to go. That's fine. And we don't want it to slip, of course. Give it a yank, stick it over, and there we go. We got 2 of them. Right, so it's time to continue talking about plumbing. I've got the clutch slab is plumbed. I've got most of the brake plumbing in. There's still the rubber hoses and the bit on the rear axle, and of course I've got to overhaul the calipers as well. But I want to talk about the fuel plumbing, and of course the journey starts in the fuel tank with the sender, and of course there's a little rubber joiner there that goes onto this other 5/16 piece of fuel hose, which goes around the sort of subframe rail and down to the front of the wheel arch. Then we go into this plastic stuff with another joiner all the way along to another rubber joiner there, where it joins the front bit of hose, what do you call it, fuel hose. Then we have another joiner and into the fuel pump. Now what's interesting about the XC is it uses 5/16 fuel hose, Bundy tube if you like. It's all bent up nicely. I'm going to reuse this. It's higher. Unlikely that any water would have collected in here and messed it up inside, so I can reuse that. And it's also quite a complicated piece to rebend. Now it goes into this plastic stuff. Now this is out of the ZH Fairlane I pulled apart. That had done 472,000 kilometres, and of course with that mileage based on about 13 miles per gallon fuel economy, it looks like a little over 100,000 litres of travel through here, so I'm not going to reuse it. Now that's got quite a thick wall thickness on it, 5.1 millimetres in fact, and then it sort of went off to this, which is sort of 3/8. Now on the XW 6s and 302s, and I think later models as well, they all used 5/16, and of course on the 5.8 engine they used a 3/8, but there's no point in having 3/8 here because it's restricted by this stuff, which is just a little over 5 millimetres. Now what I'm going to use all the way through is 5/16 Bundy tube, and this has an internal diameter of over 6.5 millimetres. It's a much thinner wall than the plastic. It doesn't need to be as thick as the plastic, and so we're going to replace it with this. Now that can be quite tricky in one way because it has to travel through the sill, and Ford elected to put this centre section through the sill, and of course you can see where it's clean. It's been through the sill and it exits around here somewhere where it gets dirty and goes up the rear wheel arch to meet this piece over here. And of course looking at the two together you can see the difference in internal diameter there. Now also at the fuel tank end is this separator. This is a vapor separator. Don't forget that the XC uses a sealed tank, so it has this sort of manifold arrangement down the bottom and at the top where it goes into a single line. That sits vertically, of course, so no fuel can get up it, where it then meets a thinner gauge plastic tube which goes down the sill with the fuel line as well. So I'm going to keep this plastic. I'm not going to replace this. This is just a vapor line that goes to the canister at the front in the engine bay, which is there in the corner. You can see it, the black thing. So I'm reusing the old plastic stuff for the vapor side of it, the dogs at the door, and we'll replace this part forward. So we'll retain this. We'll get a new sender, obviously. We'll retain this bit, new Bundy tube right to the front, and take it from there. You can just see here the state of that. Now that's rock hard, and it never ceases to amaze me just how things like this can be overlooked in a car. They're very, very dangerous. So of course we can't use that. On this end you've got sort of a steel crimped end, and that was over the plastic part, and I'm not comfortable using that with the amount of fuel that's gone through that line down there. I'm not going to use it for quids. Now this is the same as the brakes. All we're doing is we're standing on one end and unrolling it, and it's dead easy to do. And we can use the old one as a template. Of course, we're using really rubbishy tools here. This is just a old pipe cutter that I actually lost the pin out of and just stuck a sheet metal screw in there. Still does an alright job, I suppose, but it is pretty rank. There we go, that's done. And that's the centre part. Now, I'll put this away, and obviously I'll cap both ends of it so I don't get anything, any debris in there or whatever. Not a good idea to use a hacksaw with this sort of stuff. Any sort of filings in there aren't a great idea. And this, of course, is the old forward part of it, where it met the plastic out of the sill. Because this bit here is all good in terms of the shape of it. I wouldn't dare use this pipe again. And I'm particularly interested in retaining this sort of shape here, just to there, because it's it all fits well. Of course, it's all kinked and twisted there because that's where the original owner sort of pulled it out of the hole and welded up the hole with this next door, which I thought was a pretty brave move. But at the end of the day, I can figure that bit out. That's fairly easy. But I just want to make sure that these bits here are right when I start cutting it out. And as I've already done in the previous videos, I'll just use a little piece of wire and I'll strap it there, bit of masking tape, will follow it really, really closely around, and then just stick that against the new bunny and cut the right length out. Rightio, been shopping. Just wanted to talk a little bit more about this powder coating. I've had the all this stuff that I painted on the XW. I think I mentioned before I didn't bother painting this time. I've just taken it to the Media Blaster, had them powder coated. So those 8 pieces, there's the 2 rears, the 2 fronts, the sway bar, the spring covers for underneath the shocker towers, which were a mess before, now they're beautiful. And of course the bonnet locking mechanism bit, and these always scratch out where they're painted. I've just put that spring there. So all up, that was $50. It's not as reasonable as it sounds because you have to have the Media Blasted too, but it's much easier getting a whole lot of stuff done over and above just 1 or 2 pieces. That sway bar is a small one, but it's the original one. Of course, the original one's in the XW, and I don't have any problem with that, so we're all good. I've also bought this sort of Nolithane Link, pardon me, and D type brackets, and they come with their own white grease, so that can all go in. A decal kit to tell everyone that it's a XC and it's got a jack and it's got some battery charger stuff and all that sort of thing. I'll put that on. I'll show you how I'm going to do that too. Just little odds and ends, things like this. Now these have to go in obviously before the engine goes in. Well, you can put them in after, but it's just easier. These are the power steering grommets that go around those nice, not anodized, what are they called? Plated brackets and all that to hold the lines. So I bought those as well. And of course just a few other bits and pieces that were in the catalogue, and they're easy to post out. Little caps for the wheels and the fuel line grommet and some clips. The heater tap, which this car wouldn't have had one like this. It's a standard cable operated tap because I've taken the, well, it hasn't got air conditioning in it anymore, so we're just going to go with the standard one. That's a Gates one. Posted out, that was like 27 bucks or something, it wasn't much. Now I want to talk to you about these. Now I've had an email from Neil Bryce in New Zealand, and Neil's a wonderful bloke who donated the flex circuit for the back of my instrument cluster, and I've done a little bit of work with him in terms of sorting out bits and pieces and finer details of the ZH Fairlane cluster circuit that he was working on, and of course I had mine and I could sort of liaise details about it as he needed them. Now one thing that occurred to me about Neil is he's extremely thorough. He doesn't miss a trick. And of course he brought up the issue of hydrogen embrittlement when you get plating, such as zinc plating, cad plating, that sort of thing, done to high tensile parts. Now, it doesn't affect, you can read up on this, and what it basically means is that the material is still hard, but it becomes brittle and can fail. So there are bits and pieces on this car which I am going to replace. Now, these were the original pins for the upper control arms, and they come out looking absolutely lovely. Now, I'm not sure of the hardening on this because I don't understand the markings, or at least I can't find them. But I know on these bits and pieces, they're grade 8 hardened. I think they're grade 8. They're 6 strokes. I think that means they're grade 8. Now, I'm not using those. If they fail, that's a big issue because that is what basically holds the spring and the whole upper control arm against the shocker tower and allows it to move. Now, you can get replacements, which are still grade 8, but they're different. And I don't want to use those either. So I've got some second-hand ones. I've still got the 2 of these, and I've got 2 of these second-hand ones, which I've just given a rattle can paint job to. You don't actually see them Can still get away with using things like the washers, that's not a problem, but it's these areas in here that are under a lot of torsional sort of stress, you know, and also those. And I'm very worried about that because I'm tipping that's not that hard, but that is. Now, hydrogen embrittlement affects harder metals more. Now, there are ways to curb it in terms of when the materials come out of the bath that they're being plated in, they go straight into an oven and get baked. Now, I contacted my plater and they said that they only bake on request, which means none of the stuff was baked. So if they are affected, they're not cool to use. So I was probably incorrect in saying, you know, I'll just chuck everything in a box and go and get it plated, because some of the stuff that's under a lot of duress under your car may end up being compromised in terms of their strength. So just read up on it if you're thinking of doing all this sort of stuff, and make your own mind up what you want to do. You need to do your own research there. I'm going with the old stuff again, and that looks marginally different, but it's the same diameter and same length. I'm going with the old stuff because it's not been fiddled with, so that's something to keep in mind. Right, got our little painted arms here. All the bushes are in. I've got the new second-hand pins for it. I'm not using those ones, as I said. And also to get another one because this one's a little bit different and it's sort of thicker in this section here, so it sits proud of those ones, which means one side will have negative camber in that the wheel will sort of sit in at one side of it. These things here, I'm just going to sort of sit there. These aren't going to be tightened up until I can establish the right height, and then of course once that's established, then I can nip these nuts up. I'll put a bit of rubber grease behind there, because these on the XFs in the 80s we used to have squeaky front ends, and of course we used to loosen these off and pack full of grease in there. I'll just use rubber grease. I can't remember the grease we were using. It wasn't bearing grease obviously because it's rubber. I think it might have been a white grease or something. I just can't remember. Well, anyway, they can just sit there for now, and I can bolt these up to the car. But before we put those in, we have to put the fuel lines in. And a bit more work's been done, of course. I've got the transfers up here, or the decals, whatever you want to call them. People spend a long time trying to get those things level and having the electronic ignition one there. I've decided to have them just off, if you know what I mean, just not quite level, because Ford never did that. They always had them sort of higgly-piggly like that. And the electronic ignition one I'll put on the fan shroud. That's where the XD one is. And I think the original XC one that I had, that shroud has it there as well. Got the header tap in, of course, screwed that up because I mounted it too low, so it's going to come up about an inch or so. So that's a bit of a pain. Bonnet hinges are in, of course. There's something else I did. What was it? Oh, this little guy here. Hang on. And of course I'll put this on, and that was probably stupid because I still have to go in and out of the engine bay, which means it's restrictive. It's got its little springy thing there. And I didn't put a new bonnet cable on, which is now looking decidedly second hand. New bolt, and I've lost the keeper. The little thing that holds it in, I don't know what I've done with it. So, still working. This is my father-in-law's wire. When he died, there was a whole lot of washers and stuff. I don't know if you can see up there. There's all these washers and odd-sized bolts and nuts and things. And, oh, great. My mother-in-law said, look, just take what you want, what you can use. And I took a few things. And it turns out that I've used so much of it. So if he's anywhere where you can see me, I just want to say thanks, Lou. Cool. It's probably easier if I just do it bit by bit. You can tell it's a cheap drill. You can see it flexing in the vise, but I've only got the vise quite loose. Okay, so I made this forward fuel line out of a bit of 5/16 Bundy, and that's where it goes through the inner firewall, the inner guard, runs along, and then it sort of comes back behind you behind the wheel. And they normally have a spring type arrangement protecting them from debris flying off the wheel. Now, you can put convoluted tubing over that, but the problem with that, of course, is that you'll hold moisture, and I don't want to promote premature rust. So I've made this, and that will sit sort of in that area and give it some protection, although I might just sort of play around with the coils. I wrapped it around the screwdriver because it was a bit bigger. I found if it was hard around this 5/16, moisture probably wouldn't drain away from the crucial areas. But not just that, water can get away from it, and it can act as a sort of a stain shield. Okay, so we're finally ready to put these arms together. And of course, I'm not going to tighten everything down. I'll wait till it's in the car, but it just makes it easier. Put these the wrong way around. It just makes it easier to sort of semi-assemble it, if you know what I mean. And of course, here we have our spring saddles. And these are great ones, as I said, because you can move them. So just starting off the hardware and just doing a final sort of nip up later is all good. Now it's worth noting that Ford used these cutaway type flat washers underneath the spring saddle. It's the dirty side, I'll put the clean side down there. I've only got 2 of them, but you can use similar thickness or same thickness if you like. Flat washers as a substitute on the other side because they will fit. And so it just means you're really supposed to have 4 correct ones, but there's nothing wrong with doing it this way. The holes aren't elongated, so the spring saddle is still true to where it's supposed to be. And that way, being a flat washer, it's going to distribute the load across the arm better. So we do need to put washers there, but I'm putting a flat and, well, they're both flat washers, a scalloped one and a standard one there because that's all I've got. And that's okay to do. Okay, so I've got to get these things done now, and this is just oil jointing. I haven't got much of it left, that's all I've got, but there's enough here to do this thing. These gaskets here, so what I'm doing, and the easiest way to do it is just to make a circle, cut it out. Oh, that was dumb, wasn't it? And, is that enough there? Yep. Go around those bits. Oh, great. Hang on a minute. Clever dick, aren't I? And then once I've cut that hole out, I can put it on the stub axle and get the outer lines done. And of course, we'll just hit this with a wad punch above where one of the legs is, and use an engineer's hammer. Don't use a carpenter's hammer for doing this sort of thing. I should do it on a bench, but I'm being silly doing it here. But it doesn't matter. It's all good. It's working. And then I can sort of just drape that over the stub axle. Hopefully I don't drop this. Marry up the lines, which are there. Nope, wrong way. Wrong way. They're sort of set apart like that. There we go. I can just put a couple of bolts in there, draw around it from the back, cut it out, and they're good. It was lovely and straight along here, then there was a sort of a dog leg coming up. And the reason I've pushed it down like that, it doesn't look quite as attractive, but it gives better access to these holes here, which is where the front end brake lines are. You can see the spring arrangement going tightly against the clamp over there. There's actually 2 springs I made, one on that side and one on the other. And that also travels underneath the torque box as well. So I'm just going to put this in. The camera's in the way, but I can reach around it. I'm going to start scratching stuff. There's the first bit of front suspension. Almost in. And I've got it on 30 frames per second because at 60 it was just sucking. There was half an hour video, it was 8 gig. So I put it on 30. Whoops. I've put it on 30 to try and make it a little bit more efficient with space. I'm putting these on now. These are hardened as well, so I'm going to get different ones. But even these things, these camber adjusting bolts, quite often are plated when you buy them. So look, I don't know what to do. It's all a bit too hard at the moment. So I'm just going to pop these arms in. Put the through bolt through, so to speak, if I can. I'm on the wrong angle and I can't see what I'm doing. And having done that, whoops, what the hell? Oh, there it is. Having done that, then I can just sort of let it rest on that box. Well, it's not going to hit anyway, and I can put the stub axle in, like that. So I'm getting quite pumped about it because it's getting closer. But whatever the case, need to do a bit more research on this plating thing and find out which parts I need to replace. As I said, this I don't know if you can see that either arm, that's plated, and it's plated in the same stuff. It's the gold zinc. So unless that was stuck in a heater after it was plated, but even then, it's still at risk. Despite being put in a heater, it's still at risk of hydrogen embrittlement. I think that was that one. Yeah. Oh, the ball joint's stiff. Alright, come on. There we go. So we can just tighten these up, put split pins in, and we can put the what do you call them? Tie rods on as well. I think that goes that way. Oh, let's have a look. Let's see if that looks about right, which it does, which is cool. All right. That might be the wrong size. I reckon these slots might be the wrong size. Hang on, let me just see. Oh no, they're good. We haven't got the radius rods in, which is why we're sort of moving that way, but that looks all good, doesn't it? Very good. I'm happy. Well, it's Sunday today. I'm sort of out in the garage again. It's very windy, it's windy, and you can see I put the sway bar in. It's only a stocky sway bar, and lower control arm, stubs, all that. I think I already showed you that. I haven't sort of shown you underneath though. Oh. So I don't know why I put the sway bar in, because I haven't got the radius rods in yet, the caster rods. But you know what, it's really looking good. I'm very happy with how it's all looking. So I will show you what I've been painting. And so I've elected to paint the radius rods rather than powder coating them, just to keep the threads clean down the bottom, so I can sort of screw them on easily and they can be adjusted easily. It's just a big bolt through there just to lean them up against that trestle. There's the fan, and of course some alternator brackets. That's the power steering bracket from Steve Harker. He gave me that. Paul Harker, I beg your pardon. That's the power steering bracket from Paul Harker. And he gave me that along with the pedal box, which was extraordinarily kind of him. So we're getting there. We're just taking our time. Although I probably should have left the sway bar up till I put those guys on, but end of the day I'm pretty happy. So I've got Jason here. This is Jason Hill. He's doing the trimming for this XC in
Macro Soft Lagoon. Macro Soft. Yeah, it's a herringbone one.
It's a really fine herringbone. Yeah. It's funny because we looked at all the blue ones and they didn't match. And this was will be a dusk interior. And the funny thing was actually the green.
Yeah,
perfect match, wasn't it?
And from without even having sitting there with the vinyl beside it, I thought no way that one's going to work.
Yeah, it did. So
amazing.
So Jason's doing that. Thank you very much.
So we've got a bit of fabric happening in the car. So
yeah. Look, got no doors to put on. Yeah. To protect the fabric.
No, we don't need to worry about it.
I think I'll just stick garbage bags on. Yeah. You can't put them anywhere; they'll get dirty. But this stuff, this macro suede, there was a YouTube demo, and a guy drew on it with biro.
That's what I used to do when I had my retail store. Anybody that came into the store, I'd just check this out. Get a bottle of Nifty and a biro, scribble over it, and say, "There you go."
You can't get that stuff off though.
Yeah, it comes straight off. Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's good stuff. Yeah.
So I'm really happy with that. The payback for this is I have to build him an engine.
Yeah.
So I just hope he doesn't blow up.
It'll be a 351 too.
A 351. Yeah. Is the Fairmont or the Falcon?
I'm going to put in the XB.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Even though Ethan can't drive it. So.
Oh, it doesn't matter if I didn't get power to weight. But I had Jason's got a ZT.
ZF.
It's a ZF Fairlane and an XB Falcon. He's done his XW. You've seen the XW wagon on the videos, and I mean that makes this car look like trash. It's a perfect car, beautiful car.
Yeah.
But he's got the Fairlane 302. I think I had in one of the videos. But also it's an orange XB. Is it orange? No, it's
green.
It's going to be orange.
Yeah, it'll be orange.
But he had this engine that he pulled out of one of them, and it's a genuine K-Code XA engine. So that looks like the way to go.
Yeah.
So once I've got these ones done, and when you're ready, I'll do yours.
That'll be great.
So you can't leave any stone unturned, so that's perfect.
It'll be a nice one. So
Anyway, just wanted to say good day.
hello.
It's lovely to have you here.
No, it's great.
And he's going off to get the fabric now.
I've got a pocket full of cash.
There's not that much cash in there. There's not that much cash in there.
I'll keep the change.
That's a pleasure, mate. Thanks very much.
No worries, mate.
It'll go through. No. Okay. Well, that's better. Cool. These things have a sort of a spline arrangement on them, which bite into the control arm, and I'm assuming also into the top of the ball joint, the lower ball joint bracket. So I'm just going to nip these up after I've done this. Of course, I can tighten that stabilizer link down, put the lock nut on top. It's just loose at the moment. And there's also some pins need to go in the bottom of these radius rod, or what do they call them, caster rod mounts as well. And I've got to put a grease nipple on the bottom of that because one of the spring settle ones was missing, and I've used it there on the premise that that's easier to replace than the spring settle one. But it just makes it a bit of forward planning a bit better. Oh god, I think I'll be a fright, that white one. I think it focused too well where it is, but there's normally clips that go in there. We can sort of, I'm just putting split pins, it'll do the same thing, and that way, you know, if the nuts come loose, which you can't see that happening, well then obviously we are better protected. I'll put this in on a funny angle, hang on. Great if I could see what the bloody hell I was doing. There we go. That should do it. That's nice. And the final scene is a full frontal nude of the XC. So, in the next chapter, which won't be too far away, we start on the engine, because that's coming back tomorrow after we sorted out a clearancing issue with the centre thrust bearing on the crank. So, until then, drive safely, enjoy your classic, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.